Hey, Poetry Freaks. Welcome to Poetry Freaks, the podcast, episode 4, Lonely on Purpose, Letters to a Young Poet. We're looking at Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. And first, we're going to start with our Dream with Box. For our String of Pearls poem, pull out a phrase, see how it connects with the poem we're forming. A place by the water in hopes of a monster of the deep. Another monster of the deep. I think we had one before. We're right on track for, I don't know, some theme or recurring monster. Sounds good. Very poetic. All right. So we had the prompt from our last episode, which was about graveyard poets. And it's called the prompt was the mood, 'tis peace, by way of lamentable, the beautiful word, the morbid word. So I'm going to read the poem that came out. 'Tis peace, however lamentable, this death, and comfort is the grave, outfitted with velvet pillows, and window view of worms at their antics, and reams of books to read by the cigarette lighter in the pocket of your grave clothes. As bloat of gas is released, oh no, confirmed, a corpse can explode during cremation or in its casket. 'Tis lamentable. And why do I always envision the grave as a bitchin' little apartment of solitude, and go on yearning in death for the human connection of stories and music? 'Tis peace, they say. 'Tis lamentable, life ending in nothingness while consciousness continues. Not my belief. No, that would be far too catastrophically lamentable. Thank you for listening to my poem. And if that got weird, remember this. It's a poem about the grave, because the gloomy tradition of the graveyard school, our last fine foray into the glad, glistening, glitter-glazed poetic scene. And now it's time to roll a new prompt. Ooh, I must get my whiskey glass. To roll the 10-sided die for mood, Rilke mood. Oh, yeah, I don't quite have my setup right. I keep messing with it. Rilke moods and Rilke words in honor of Letters to a Young Poet. So I will roll the die for a mood. Mood number 3, 1,000 Nights of Love Revive. Thank you. Did you know Rilke had sort of a little bit of the lover in him? He did. Read which letter was it? I want to say letter number 7, but we'll get to that. Okay, we need a Rilke word. And that one is word number 2, aloneness. Aloneness. That's a very Rilke word, and you will find out more very quickly. Very toot sweet, as the pilot said. Pretty toot sweet. That was on an airplane. I overheard a pilot talking to another pilot. Funny. Whatever it was, they were going to be doing it pretty toot sweet in a New York accent. From 1903 to 1908, the Bohemian-Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke exchanged letters with a young poet named Franz Xaver Capus, who had sent Rilke some of his poems for critique. First thing, Rilke refused to give criticism, calling it happy misunderstandings, with the idea that art is too inexpressible, too mysterious, and if the poet has doubts, he goes on to say, that poet should ask, must I write or die? To Rilke, that's how you know you're a poet. If I can't write, I'll die. There you go. So Letters to a Young Poet, gathered by Capus and published in 1929, contains 10 letters from Rilke to the young poet. Here are the main ideas, according to me. In letter number 1, must I write? And Rilke's quote, a work of art is good if it has sprung from necessity. Number 2, careful of irony. Also, he gives book recommendations, specifically the works of Jens Peter Jacobsen. Number 3, everything is gestation and bringing forth. Plus, some more words about Jacobsen's novels. And the quote, await with deep humility and patience the birth hour of a new clarity. That alone is living the artist's life. All right. Letter number 4, live the questions. Letter number 5, I hate Rome, but beauty is everywhere. Letter number 6, solitude. All capital letters. Great inner solitude is the necessary thing. Letter number 7, solitude is good, to love is good, but difficult. Yes, I think that is where he tips his hand as being something of a lover. Letter number 8, sadnesses. Something new enters in us. We are solitary. Be ready for everything. Letter number 9, argue with doubt, ask it for proofs. And letter number 10, self-reliant attentiveness, plus art too is only a way of living. Boom, the short version. Rilke talks of essential aloneness, the word we drew for the poetry prompt, and aloneness being distinct from loneliness. And this, of course, brings to mind when I was in Romania, and it was like 1999 to 2000, and some of my Romanian contemporaries would ask, "You stay lonely?" And I would answer, "No, not lonely, but I live alone." So I'm still not certain whether they kind of equated loneliness with, living alone. If you're alone, you must be lonely. Or if they were just still learning the finer points of the English language. And I tend to favor the latter. I think that they were getting a grasp on the language. And so I helped. All right. And the whole thing brings to mind The Jewel by James Wright. But first I want to say about Rilke and solitude. He valued solitude greatly for the artist, for the learning times, for the figuring out your feelings times, and observing and figuring out how you put things into poetry and seeing the life as a poet would for description later and things like that. So solitude was a big deal. And he brings up points of if you have a life partner or a lover, how you can honor solitude in each other. Very cool book. Short book. Usually inexpensive. It's gotten more expensive. You used to always be able to find a copy of it at half-price books for $2. Now it's going on like $7. But I used to like to do that and give it away and stuff. Anyway, that poem, The Jewel by James Wright, which is, I found it at allpoetry.com, says copyright by owner, provided at no charge for educational purposes. So let us educate ourselves. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch. A cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. James Wright. Carl Phillips, writing for Poetry Magazine in a piece titled On Loneliness to You, he mentions The Jewel. Phillips calls this cave in the poem, or the wind, loneliness. He misremembers the title of a charlatan song as loneliness when actually the title is honesty, so he decides the two are connected. I personally connected with Phillips in reading his article, whether I have any right to or not. For out of step deep and honest emotions, for the occasional feeling that I'm walking a different track from the rest of the entire world, and my swatting along at poems and jokes that just don't always land. And I must need my inexplicable loneliness because it's there. It's there when I'm in a lonely relationship. It's there when I'm in a relationship where I feel utterly cherished. It's the one of my moods mentioned at the beginning of every episode of Podcast in A Minor, the one where I am nothing with the addition that I will never feel right or be enough. So it must be necessary, this feeling, this loneliness. To the art is nothing. Who cares? So you get the idea. Cheery. I shall now read the poem Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were, I have not seen as others saw, I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow, I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone, and all I loved alone. Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Right on. I would not call my life as stormy as Edgar Allan Poe's by any stretch, but yet, when the mood descends, that is a poem I can connect with. That's a poem that many can connect with. So it's the mood, the useless poet, misunderstood, accursed, alone. And in this mood, why am I trumpeting the works of others, those favored seen? These are never things I say out loud. I'm always kind of fearing that voice that would snarl, you want to be seen? We'll do better then. Stop sucking. I really should do an episode about the confessional poet. I'm being confessional right now. And I'm just inescapably like a confessional poet. The first time I learned that term, that was a way to be a poet, I was thrilled because I was already that. And yet the poets called confessional poets despised the term. They despised it. It made them think of those True Confession magazines in the 1930s, which I am not too snobby to represent. What I do despise is that mood, and yet I seem to cuddle up to it. What I hate is the transitory nature of poetic freedom I nurtured long and hard. And with a whole hatful of major life changes in the past year, I've not lost it, but maybe like misplaced it somewhere, somehow. And what was lost? The freedom or the unbridled joy, a sense of legitimacy I dreamed up for myself? Rilke was kind of a head case about this stuff too. Thank God he did not let it stop him. And here one turns to Rilke in his first letter to the young poet. Do not look outward for affirmation of your work. Look inside. Must you write poetry or die? It seems I must. It's my rule in the play, and I must, and I must, and I must. From the theme to podcast in A minor, well, obviously I've neglected my vegetables and my prayers and my yoga of late. If I hadn't, probably my mind would be right. And the house is too cold, and so I put on my sweatshirt and I burrow under the blanket and I imagine myself in a damp and ancient castle where something terrifying and blood-chilling and ghostly is just about to happen. This helps tremendously. I will read one from an oldie from 2022's Electrified Corset. Right quick, if I may. Remedy. Mind your nose, starlet, and don't blow a fuse. Life delights in you, then crash, it's a ruse. Life is delicious, then whoosh comes a wind. Mind your glue sticky and keep your hair pinned. Mind you're no debutante, don't blow your stack. Let in the moonlight and straighten your back. Take your ballet stance and everything's mellow. Mind that you're folksy and whip up a jello. I think I will. One of these days. And then there's Rilke's 7th letter. It was written in Rome, and he focuses this letter, this is from Wikipedia, Rilke focuses this letter on love and relationships, specifically on the necessity of aloneness. He writes, "It is true that many young people who do not love rightly, who simply surrender themselves and leave no room for aloneness, experience the depressing feeling of failure. So alone on purpose, if you get what I'm saying." Okay, right on, Rainer Maria, and it's hot. So let's wrap up this biz. Get on out there, poetry freaks, with our new prompts for new poems. Aloneness was in there. I forget what the mood was. Oh, what was it? It was like number 3. I'm scrolling back for you. The mood was 1,000 Nights of Love Revived. And the word was aloneness, which came up frequently in our studies today here on Poetry Freaks. So go ahead, write a poem, send it in. I'll read it here. I really will. So I hope that you enjoy a splendid Wednesday and dig into that poetry. And we'll see you next time. Poetry Freaks.